This gun lights your firemen, the pilot lights out.
This football team is coming into our place. We're standing in our way.
This is a game of the heart. Focus and finish.
Welcome to Roto Experts Thursday Night Fantasy Football Focus. I'm Mike Cardano along with Fantasy Sports Writer Association Hall of Famer Scott Engel. Scotty, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm ready to get Week 10 started.
All right, tonight we're going to break down tonight's NFL matchup between the Washington Redskins and Minnesota Vikings. Let's get right to it. Now, if I'm correct, I think this is the third primetime game in the last 4 weeks for the Vikings. So my question is why are we being punished this way?
Because they have Adrian Peterson, and people want to watch Adrian Peterson as much as they don't want to watch Jerome Simpson, Greg Jennings, and Christian Ponder.
Yeah, all right, we'll get to Adrian Peterson later, but let's go each player one at a time from a fantasy perspective, and we'll break this down. I was pretty surprised when I looked at the over-under of this game. Yesterday I looked, it was as high as 50.5. Today it's come down a bit, it's 49.5. But no matter how you look at it, the folks in Vegas are looking at some fantasy scoring here. So let's get right to it. So the Redskins scored 45 points 2 weeks ago against Chicago, right? And Griffin looked excellent as a runner. They scored 30 points, and he did fantastic last week, right? And then 2 weeks ago, it was like the worst game of his career. So, which RG3 is it?
Well, he didn't do fantastic last week, at least in terms of fantasy perspectives. A lot of people look at this game, great matchup for RG3, but he hasn't had great games against Dallas, Detroit, and San Diego fantasy-wise, all would seem like prime matchups. Plus, he's playing on a short week. Mechanically, he's been inconsistent.
Yeah, last week they put up 500 yards of offense. And the week before, nothing in Denver. And it's not
the fantasy numbers weren't outstanding last week, though, because they kept going to the fullback near the goal line. That's a problem with RG3. He's putting up some passing numbers, but his mechanics have been inconsistent. And when they get near the goal line, they're not rushing him in. He's not throwing really because they don't have some great receivers in the red zone. There are no real big targets there. So, other than Jordan Reed, I would figure. So, I think RG3 is an okay play tonight.
He's healthy now, though, right? I mean, it looks like at times he can run when he wants to now.
But the passing mechanics have been inconsistent, and a lot of fantasy owners have been disappointed with him because he hasn't put up the numbers that they've quite expected. When he's not getting the passing touchdowns and the rushing touchdowns, people feel like they're let down by RG3.
Right. All right. Let's move on to something.
He's a quality start for tonight.
Okay, let's move on to something you alluded to, and that goes to Alfred Morris. All right, last week 25 carries, 121 yards at a TD, nice. But then here comes Darrell Young with 3 touchdowns, 2 of them from the 1 yard line, and then a couple of weeks ago, Roy Halou. Same thing. So what's going on here? Do the Shanahans, the father and son, do they just hate fantasy football? Are they just trying to screw Alfred Morris owners? I mean, this guy can't catch a break. He runs it all the way down the field. He gets there, they pull him out, and they stick the other guy in for the touchdown.
Well, that's because they're trying to keep the defense off balance because the defense is expecting Alfred Morris to run it in, so they feel it's easier to get in the red zone by using another way. But Alfred Morris got his touchdown last week. He's still going to continue to get touchdowns.
He had 4.
I'm not going to get worried about him. He still gave you good yardage numbers and a touchdown. It's hard to get that from a lot of fantasy running backs overall. I'm not going to look at what I didn't get. I'm going to say I'm still getting good numbers from Alfred Morris. I certainly expect them tonight.
If I'm a Morris owner, I'm pissed. That's 6 touchdowns over those 2 games. I'm
not. I'd rather be an Alfred Morris owner than, say, a Ray Rice owner.
Right. Well, okay. Yeah, me too. All right. Pierre Garcon, he's having a fantastic PPR year. Now, in standard leagues,
fantastic.
He's averaging 7 receptions a game, 85 yards. 7 receptions a game is
he's not getting
he's in the upper echelon of catches.
In the end zone enough though.
Well, that's why in standard leagues, I think he's reached the end zone twice.
He's been giving you pretty good numbers, but I think people expected a little bit more. Last week was fantastic. I think people expect a little bit more upside from Pierre Garcon until last week. I think they were like, okay, I don't have anything to be upset about, but I think I was kind of expecting more.
Well, would you agree he's more useful in the PPR league than a standard league?
Oh,
just
definitely.
because of the fact he's not getting in the end zone. Yeah.
Definitely. But he hasn't been breaking the big plays that we've expected.
Right, okay. All right, so Leonard Hankerson on the other side. What are your prospects for Leonard?
By the way, I do love Garcon tonight as a wide receiver too. Morris is a must start. Leonard Hankerson could get in the end zone. You got a receiver on bye. It's kind of a roll of the dice. He's very touchdown dependent, and he only gets them occasionally. Not somebody that's high on my radar. Hankerson, against that pass defense, they got injuries in the secondary in Minnesota. He's an okay play.
Yeah, okay.
Not my top 40.
Okay, let's go over to the tight end. Someone that I know you turned me on to many, many weeks ago, and I think he's just fantastic. Nobody had him at all, so I think it was a steal, and that's Jordan Reed. So what do you think about Jordan tonight?
I think Jordan Reed is a must-play every week. He's top 4 in fantasy every week. He's a big target. He got more, he's getting more involved in the flow of the offense. I'd like to see him more consistently involved throughout the game. But whether they play catch-up or they're in the flow of the game, Jordan Reed is going to get his. A lot of people maybe have a Gronk and a Jordan Reed, and you don't play
Gronk's off this week, right?
Yeah, and if you're lucky enough to do that, fine. But if you have Jimmy Graham and Jordan Reed, you got to move Jordan Reed for something. But in most cases, he's a must-start.
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Those two. Yeah. Okay, let's go over to the Vikings and Adrian Peterson. Okay, last week 140 yards and a touchdown. That's the Adrian Peterson we all come to know and love. But, for the 3 weeks before that, he had 13 carries, and 10 carries for a total of 150 yards and 1 touchdown. So now, what the hell is going on over there? They had no quarterback during that time period either. It was in flux.
He had a hamstring problem. He had an injury, and I think he's healthy again. You don't have to worry about him tonight. You just plug him in. He's the focal point of the game plan. Even if they put 8 in the box to stop him, he still gets his yardage. What a beautiful, beautiful touchdown run he had last week.
Oh, it's even if you don't have him, it's just a must watch.
Yeah,
just to watch him do it.
Yeah.
It's like, all right. So what do you make of Ponder? Last week, 236 yards, 1 TD, 1 interception. He did have 4 rushes for 29 yards, and he rushed for a touchdown. 17 fantasy points. You could do worse than that.
He's not rosterable. He's not rosterable. That's the ceiling for somebody like him. He's a mediocre fantasy quarterback. The Vikings are hoping that he doesn't make mistakes, that he manages the game, gets a little creative once in a while. He can run a little bit, but there's about 25 quarterbacks you'd rather have. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And 2 of them not Matt Castle and Josh Freeman.
Castle might operate the offense a little bit better for fantasy purposes. Look what he did when they played in London.
Yeah, is Freeman? They're just going to give him his $3 million. He's going to sit.
I guess maybe they'll keep him for next year.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Kyle Rudolph, tight end, out a month. It looks like with his broken foot. His understudy John Carlson. Any value there?
No. Carlson's been non-existent since his rookie year in Seattle.
Nothing to see. Move along.
There's nothing to see here. Move along. The guy is had that one good rookie year, was very promising. Nothing since.
Okay. Greg Jennings, Jerome Simpson, and Cordarrelle Patterson is exciting on the punt return team. Anything in the receiving game? Nothing.
Like I said in the preseason, Jennings was going to be a bust. Aaron Rodgers made him. He's past his prime. Jerome Simpson, we saw him, have a great
Looks
game.
Like he blocks well.
Great game. That doesn't mean anything for fantasy, Pro Football Focus is on top of that. That's very nice. Jerome Simpson had the great game in Week 1. Had another good game somewhere along the line, which I can't recall right off the top of my head. Not somebody you want to use if you're going to make your fantasy playoffs. Cordarrelle Patterson in leagues that count return yards. He can get a touchdown any time, but he's not going to get you much catches.
Okay. All right, the defenses, I think I've pinpointed why the over-under is so high. The Vikings are 29th, and the Redskins are 30th, each giving up about 400 yards per game. So unless there's some turnovers here, there's no way to play either of those two defenses.
I'm taking the under, though, because Minnesota really doesn't have the type of offense other than Peterson to really put up a high number.
The Redskins' defense isn't any good, though.
Yeah, but,
all right,
but the Vikings may not be capable of
kept up with Dallas.
They might.
They kept up with Dallas. Didn't they almost pull that one out? Actually, I think they outplayed him.
Dallas has a pretty bad pass defense, too, though. But I'm saying you can't rely on the Vikings.
No, you can't play either of those.
Stick close. I would take the under.
Do you like either of the kickers, Blair Walsh or Kai Forbath?
I like Kai Forbath kicking indoors.
Okay. For Mike Cardano, Scott Engel, Thursday Night Football, the Redskins at the Vikings. Enjoy the game, everyone.